For this section, and very exciting too. Another favourite of ours, Fran Press, Associate Professor, Francis Press, we call Fran, teaches and researches in early childhood education at Charles Sturt University, another world-class institution. Fran is interested in how government policy can better support high-quality early childhood programmes. She is a member of the Work and Family Roundtable in Australia, which is comprised of 31 researchers with expertise on work, care and family policy, with the goal of informing good evidence-based public policy in Australia. Fran joins us fresh from Melbourne with Confessions of a Contrarian. Welcome, Fran.
I have to say I'm absolutely terrified because I haven't got a PowerPoint. This is a very scary thing for an academic. And I do have some handwritten notes, but I was actually taking the instructions very literally and thought I wasn't allowed to have notes at all.
That's not very contrarian.
No, it's not. It's obedient, isn't it? Yes. And the other issue is I'm not doing my usual gig, which is sort of about policy, and how important it is. It's really a bit of a personal journey because I have to say with sincerity that community childcare absolutely changed the course of my life. So when I was asked to speak, I had to think about the impact that community childcare had on me, and so you have to be a little bit indulgent. And I have to hope that I don't cry or do something embarrassing like that while I talk to you about why I've called this Confessions of a Contrarian. I was a little bit hesitant about using this title because I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to be characterised primarily as a contrarian. And then, although I'm sure there are a few people in the room that probably laughed when they saw the title. And then when I Googled contrarianism, I found out that scientific contrarianism is actually associated with climate change deniers. And I thought, well, I don't want to be in that camp because I'm not really talking about taking an oppositional view for the sake of taking an oppositional view, or taking a view against an evidence base, or taking a contrary view because you want some sort of personal notoriety, or because it's driven by ideology. But I am thinking about the times in my life where I've had to completely change my worldview or change what I thought were dearly held beliefs because of experiences, information and being challenged. And many of those challenges came from colleagues in community childcare. So I never thought I was going to be an early childhood academic. In fact, I grew up in a regional town in New South Wales, and of my generation, the career options were thus. You left school in 4th form, that's year 10 for the young, and you went off and you became a nurse's aide, training at the base hospital. You went to 6th form, year 12, and you went to the base hospital and trained to be a nurse. Or you went to the psych hospital and you trained to be a psychiatric nurse. Or you went to Mitchell College, Bathurst, now CSU, and trained to be a teacher. Or, if you're a bloke, you had the added option of working at the abattoirs in Blaney. Or, and I didn't know whether I should confess this to this audience, but I will, you went on unemployment benefit and you supplemented your income by dealing drugs. I decided, because I was a feminist at a young age, that I was not going to be a teacher or a nurse. I wasn't going to do those traditional female occupations. I was going to go to university. And I remembered an incident when our sixth form teachers were at the pub with us after we did our exams. I wonder if that would happen now. I certainly was underage, but we're all at the pub celebrating the end of school. And one of the teachers said to me, male teacher, he'd asked everyone, "And what do you hope to do?" And I said, "I hope to study law." 4 of us in our class wanted to study law, 3 blokes and me. This teacher turned around and literally guffawed in a way he did not guffaw at the blokes, and metaphorically patted me on the head and said, "Oh, but that's really hard. What do you really want to do?" Anyway, I did go off to study law. And my contrarian lesson number 1 is that sometimes you either have to metaphorically, if not literally, stick your finger up to the people who want to constrain you or limit your vision of what you can be or your vision of the world. So I graduated with university, not with a law degree by the way, not with a teaching degree either. And I emerged with some of the orthodoxies, I guess, of my generation, and I was fond of saying things like, there's no difference between the major parties, they're all the same, you know, democracy doesn't really exist, blah, 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 blah. And I worked for a few years in the community sector, and then I went backpacking. And I came back to find that there'd been an election and a Conservative government had been elected, and all the places I used to work had lost their funding. Contrarian lesson number 2. Politics and policy matters. There are differences between the major parties, and thank God we've also got other political parties as well that exacerbate those differences. But policy matters, and reform matters. And sometimes we get much smaller policy reforms than we want or that we hope for, but they are reforms nonetheless, and they do make a difference to people's lives. And we should be fighting for those reforms, but also applauding them when we do get them. So, political short-sightedness, which gave rise to all the organisations I used to work for losing their funding, was also the reason why I ended up working at community childcare. Now I'm just wondering, I saw Prue Borrello this morning, but I'm wondering if there's anyone here from Families at Work. Okay, it's also their 35th birthday. I just mentioned that because I went for a job with them first of all and they rejected me. But I ended up working with community childcare, and this was, as I said before, a totally transformational experience. I had never seen myself working in early childhood education, and I walked into this organisation of feisty, intelligent, passionate people that really captivated me in terms of the work they were doing. And I met early childhood educators who really captivated me in terms of the work they were doing. And my eyes were opened up to this whole new world. It was very exciting. It sparked my interest and passion, and it has never stopped challenging me. But I was a person in the years BC, and that's before community childcare, that remembers sitting at the kitchen table reading a newspaper article about people who worked in childcare services should be qualified. And at that time I went, can you believe it? Why would you need qualified people to work with young children? Clearly I changed my mind since I teach early childhood education. But what made me change my mind? Well, one is I was challenged, of course, by the people around me. I was exposed to information and research that I had never come across before or read before. I was working alongside people in childcare centres and got to observe the complexity and the quality of the work that they were doing. I was exposed, in other words, to information and experiences that I hadn't previously been exposed to. So the Contrarian lesson number 3 is that challenges to your beliefs and worldviews are really opportunities for learning something new or understanding something new or understanding the world more deeply. They're not an affront to us personally, they're opportunities. Most recently, I had the opportunity to work with Sandy Wong on a history of Early Childhood Australia, the organisation Early Childhood Australia, which started off in 1938 as the Australian Association for Preschool Child Development. And I'm not sure if... no, I won't do that again. I won't say what I was going to say, that's another story. But anyway, these women that started this organisation were very formidable, passionate women, and I would not like to have stood in their way. They were very persistent and they were visionary. I learnt a lot of things about that organisation that I hadn't known before, and I think a lot of people probably didn't know. They were charged with the project of getting the Lady Gowrie childcare centres established in each capital city. And the Lady Gowrie childcare centres were established as model preschools and centres for child development to study children's development. And it was interesting to me that in the face of widespread public opposition, that organisation refused to teach religion in the preschool. And I thought that was a contrary position. They were contrary women, and that was based on their vision of what they thought early childhood should be. They were vilified for not teaching religion in the preschool. It wasn't expected that they would not do that, but they stood by their guns and they refused to do it. They also developed those programs at a time of the Second World War. So they really had a vision for early childhood education, being connected to notions of democracy, citizenship, equality, and they were really interested in what did it mean to plan for a post-war world that promoted peace and not conflict as a way of being in the world. So what they were doing was driven by a vision. Is someone going to give me a warning? How long? Oh, good. Now, I have been a person, and apologies to long-standing ECA members, that has often thought that Early Childhood Australia or the Australian Preschool Association or Australian Early Childhood Association, etc., whatever its acronym has been, has sometimes been a bit staid and conservative and slow to act. But after doing this history, I have a completely new respect for the battles that those women fought. So, my next contrarian lesson is that something always comes along that complicates your worldview. Just when you think you have a certainty about life, something will come along and stuff it up for you, and you'll have to think about it again. Now, there's no doubt that community childcare itself did emerge because of some of the conservatism of what was APA at the time. The community childcare movement emerged to support parent-led, community-based childcare programs as they were being proliferated during the 1970s and 80s. Some people in the Australian Preschool Association were not too supportive of women being in the workforce, nor were they supportive of children being in childcare for long hours. So there were splits and dichotomies within the early childhood movement. And some of you may be old enough to remember the splits that you might have experienced as workers in childcare centres, with teachers in kindergartens. These were very profound splits between people. And we've worked for some time to try and bridge those gaps, I think. And it's still a work in progress. So I began to think about the possibility that I might be a bit of a contrarian when I found myself being equally frustrated in the types of policy conversations I was having with some of my more postmodern colleagues, as I was when I went to the conferences of blokes in suits who were talking about evidence-based policy and the role of government intervention. So on the one hand, I was having these mental arguments when I was hearing critiques of policy as being constraining, as being normalising, as being limiting to children's life chances, as I was having mental arguments with the blokes in suits for being so wedded to science and what they saw as legitimate evidence for informing policy. So I thought, what is it? Why am I arguing in my head with everyone? Am I just a contrary type of person? I hope not, because I had to sit down and think about it. And I came to the conclusion that my frustration was really born out of what I see as the uselessness of falsely dichotomised positions. That we constantly or often put ourselves into positions where it's us or them, either or, this way or that way, when in fact entrenched dichotomies get you nowhere. There's a lot to be learnt from trying to understand the position of people who have not got the same position as you, okay? To really get to the heart of their perspective and see how that might broaden or enrich your own understanding of the world or your own view. So my contrarian lesson for this one is entrenched dichotomies actually get you nowhere. So what are the lessons from these confessions of a contrarian? Here I am teaching early childhood education at the institution I rejected when I was leaving school. It's not just that life takes you on unpredictable twists and turns. I think it's about being prepared to be challenged and to challenge the views of others. To not take a contrary position just for the sake of it, but to really take positions that are informed by as much experience, listening, evidence, information as you can be informed by. It's about creating, I think, a vision for an alternative future, but one that's not just about you in your childcare centre or me in my office. It's not one that's just informed by our individual preferences, but one that's about thinking more broadly about the collective good and what does it mean to live in a socially just society. It means thinking beyond our individual condition to the human condition or the human conditions and leveraging for the public good or the collective good. It's about being an advocate, and I think community childcare has led advocacy for the whole of its life, and that's a tradition that it should be proud of. But it is also a call not to be a mindless advocate. That the positions that we advocate for are informed. They do consider the perspectives of other people. And we're not just saying a mantra that in the end becomes meaningless because it simply becomes a bunch of words. It means that we have to have a vision for how the world might be and a preparedness to articulate that vision or illustrate that vision in a language that others can understand. We have to learn to talk outside our profession, not just to one another. I think we have to be open to the perspectives of other people and use them to broaden and enrich our own understanding and perspective, but not think that that means we don't have a position. We actually do need to have positions and things that we stand up for. So that's really all that I have to say, but I would like to say that there are many people in this room who may realise it or who may not realise it, who have really challenged my view of the world since I walked into the world of community childcare in 1988 or 89, I can't remember when I started there, 1990, somewhere around there. People either explicitly contradicted me, and I'm looking at you, Louise Brennan, if I can, or they implicitly did just by doing things or saying things in a way that I had never thought of before. The other lesson is that sometimes when you're engaging in advocacy and debate, you can get really frustrated because the person across the table or the people across the table don't seem to get what you're saying immediately. Well, I can tell you that sometimes it's taken 20 years for the penny to drop for me, that you cannot always predict the impact of what you say. It may not be immediate, but it may have a profound impact later on. So I wish you the best in all your advocacy. Thank you.